Today's topic is the Declaration of Independence. Let's review. Earlier this week, I had you do some reading. So just as a quick review, remember that for the majority of the colonial period, England paid very little attention to the colonists, and mostly because England was busy fighting wars in Europe. Plus, the colonies were really far away. Remember, England is on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. So the colonists got very used to ruling themselves. And remember, this is the big idea called self-government. The problem was there was a war. And this was the war between the French and the English, and it took place in the 13 colonies. But England had to send over troops and pay for the war, and so the king back in England believed that the colonists should have to pay back some of the cost of this war. And to do that, the King of England passed several different tax laws. One of those is called the Sugar Act. The Sugar Act basically gave English soldiers the right to go onto ships and search for illegal goods. And this is basically the idea of a search warrant. The Sugar Act also required that certain goods could only be shipped to England, which meant that if there was another country that might pay a higher price for like wood or tobacco, the colonists were not allowed to sell those goods to any other country but England. Next was a Stamp Act. And the Stamp Act is a tax on paper items. And then the Quartering Act. This law required that normal citizens open their homes to English soldiers who needed a place to eat and sleep. Then was the Townsend Acts. And the Townsend Acts were taxes on glass, lead, tea, paint, and even paper. And another one is the Tea Act, and this was a new tax on tea in addition to the Townsend Acts, which the Townsend Acts ended up going away. But the colonists were so upset with the Tea Act that they had the Boston Tea Party, and this was when colonists dressed up as Native Americans and threw a bunch of tea into the Boston Harbor. So that's a quick look at some of the taxes that England put on the colonists, and the colonists were not happy about these taxes. From the colonists' point of view, this was not representative government. They felt that a government should not be able to tax its people without the people having some representation in government. So the famous cry, no taxation without representation, that's where this comes from. And of course, King George III, he thought that the colonists, no matter what, they should have to repay for the cost of this war. So let's put this in our notes. Today we're on page 84. And we're going to title this Independence. The definition of independence is freedom from the control of others. So I want you to draw a square, and if you have colored pencil, lightly shade that in. Then add a crown, a nose, some eyes, and some facial hair. And this is going to be our king, King George III. And we're going to give him a quote. And he's saying, "Send your tax money to England." This right here, if you don't know, that's a money sign. It didn't come out as clear as I'd like. Sorry. Put a circle around it and give that quote to the king. And don't forget to put that's King George. So King George was taxing the colonists. And that made the colonists angry. So over here, we're going to draw an angry colonist and put the letter C so we know that's for the colonist. And their famous quote is no taxation without representation. So make sure you give him that quote. Because of all these taxes, the colonists decided they were done. So they wrote a document called the Declaration of Independence. They declared their independence from Britain. Again, King George, taxed the colonists, a whole bunch of taxes. This made the colonists very angry. They felt that they had no representation and therefore they should not be taxed. And so they wrote the Declaration of Independence. So I want you to draw a rectangle in the center of what's left of your page. It's about 6 spaces tall. And the Declaration of Independence is basically the world's most famous breakup letter. It's like, "Dear King George, we're done with you, and sincerely the 13 colonies. We're breaking up," right? Well, it wasn't exactly worded like that, but it is a very famous breakup letter. So what was in this famous breakup letter? Well, first I want you to put that it listed 27 grievances. 27 grievances. And grievances is just a big word that means complaints. So it listed 27 complaints about King George. It also listed reasons why the colonies needed to be free from England. Thomas Jefferson is credited with being the person who wrote the first draft of this document. And the Declaration of Independence reflected the ideas from the Enlightenment. Remember that the Enlightenment is when we learned about those political thinkers. Remember Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau, Montesquieu. Those are the political thinkers from the Enlightenment. And some of those Enlightenment ideas, I want you to put them right here. I drew an arrow down right here. The first one I want you to put in here is that all people are entitled to certain rights. Just by virtue of being born, all people are entitled to certain rights. That is one of the ideas reflected from the Enlightenment. Another one in the Declaration of Independence is that a government's power comes from the consent of the governed. I want you to put a box around consent of the governed because that's an important phrase for you to know. What this means is that a government should get its power from the people. So consent it basically means like permission, and the governed would be the people. So the government should not have the power to pass taxes without the permission of the people. This was the point of the no taxation without representation cry from the colonists. And that is our notes for this week. Thanks for watching.